That is so, that is, yeah, I can imagine, what doctors have to go through. I mean, even us as patients, the first thing we look at is the doctor's face, right? Everything, we don't even look at, we don't even listen to what the doctor is saying. We just need to look at your face, and the answers are there. So you find a lot of doctors trying to keep a straight face or whatever, but the eyes speak, the visage speaks and everything. Sometimes the patient already knows that this is what's going to happen. They just need probably, just a second opinion from the doctor to say, no, 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 you got that down pat. But like you rightly said, it's best to be, truthful, honest, frontal, and tell them exactly what it is, before it gets much worse.
If that's how the patient is preparing themselves. Sometimes they're not prepared to hear that immediately, but as things go on and it becomes more apparent and they make peace with whatever it is, make peace with the fact I've got diabetes or I've got cancer or my memory is now beginning to fail me, whatever it happens to be. That's the point at which you need you it's this is when you talk about health design, this is very much about that. Medicine is an art, and you need to know when that person is ready to hear this, and how they're ready to hear this. Because if you break
Yes.
the news at the time when they're not ready, they don't hear the message, or they hear a message that you never intended for them to receive. And this is incurable or untreatable. That's often not the message. The message is, this is going to be tricky and we're going to be together on this journey.
Hmm. Exactly. At least that gives the patient some succor. And hearing that sometimes there have been turnaround cases, there have
Mm,
been miracles that have happened.
mm,
Some diagnoses that would say, oh, they have 6 months to live. Like I have a friend who is a mesothelioma survivor, and she was given 6 months. She's still here 16 years later. So sometimes we just need that push, or that not push, that nudge to say you can do it. And it's the mind. And as I will come to it later, it's probably also the doctor that who is involved, because sometimes doctors are, of course, they are angels, but they also give us that that foundation for being positive, you know.
mm. I would argue that doctors are not angels. I would argue that doctors are very human, and it is that humanity that is the thing that we find most comforting. We don't find the comfort in this person being a miracle worker. We
Mhm.
find comfort in somebody who looks like us, talks like us, understands us, feels what we feel, and that somehow makes us stronger.
The last time we spoke about spirituality. And you find a lot of doctors too that infuse spirituality in the art of healing. Like you said, medicine is an art, right? And this really helps. This really goes a long way with what I have gathered with other patients, and people we have had interactions with. So regardless of what you say, doctors can be angels, yes. In human form,
I
yeah.
think that's fair, just to say that that's what we like and that's what we expect. But what I would want to do is make sure that we are aware of our own failings and our
Hmm.
own ability sometimes not to do the right thing, even when we have the tools at our disposal. And we need to be kind to ourselves as doctors, and also to be very clear with patients that whilst we are here to walk with you, we are still fallible, and that's not something we hide from.
Hmm.
Because for me, the interaction between doctor and patient, I get as much out of our interactions with patients as they might get out of an interaction with me. I find it deeply spiritually satisfying, and that's why I continue doing what I do.
Absolutely. And you're doing a fantastic job, Dr. Jiwa. An awesome job.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. So, still on the patient and the patient debt, of course, like I was saying, many of us are still dealing, like, people like me, were still paying every day, for our cancer treatments and all that, even though we are somewhat backed by insurance. But for those of us that have continuous huge medical debts and everything, um, these illnesses, I'm not just talking about cancer here, other medical, other chronic illnesses. How would you speak to these patients to kind of give them succor, by offering information or whatever to be able to overcome this situation? How do you have some kind of, what resources do you have to help people that are having these issues?
I think the first thing to do is to look at the options that are on the table. And there are many, many options on the table. There are options that for some patients are beyond their means. You could go to, the Mayo Clinic and get the latest treatment of this or that, or you could go to your local hospital and get something different. I think the key thing to say to patients is that even in what they call a randomized controlled trial, where they give people the best treatment and where they get the next best option, even those who are getting the so-called best treatment don't necessarily do well out of that treatment. So no treatment is a guarantee of a particular outcome. And we need to make sure that the patient gets that very clearly.
Mm.
Often we have to look at what is the evidence that really expensive Rolls-Royce treatment could change your life dramatically, and see that, in fact, it's not all it's cut out to be. There's still a chance that this thing won't work. And then you compare it with the next best option, and you find that there sometimes isn't that much difference in the outcome between that option, which the specialist is selling to you, and the other option, which is less expensive and which may actually deliver just as good a result. And that's not always the case. In some
Mhm.
cases, you do need the best that's available because there's nothing else available. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about for the generality. For most patients, there are options. And sometimes the cheaper, if you want to call it that, option is just as good. But you need to have the faith that this is something that you will be able to work through and that you will feel comfortable with, and that the doctors that you are with will walk with you on that road and help you, even if you are getting what you think at this point is second best treatment.
So,
It
yes.
is.
Hmm.
And very sadly that, you're having a conversation about money and resources, as I said. So I would predicate that comment with that. But the reality is that we are faced with this economic situation,
Hmm.
and it's up to us doctors to help patients feel confident that, at the very least, the most powerful thing that we have to offer in medicine is ourselves, is the comfort, is the support, it's the walking with the patient in that dark place.
Yes, Dr. Jiwa, that is it. Absolutely. I do agree with you. Yeah. So, yes, as I said at the beginning, the pandemic has brought about so many crazy situations. 2020 was something else, but at the same time, we saw that it opened up avenues and inroads to much more, innovative solutions as regards healthcare. Um, I know that you're very, very involved in digital health solutions for successful outcomes, regarding patients. But then you still find out that, some old school people, baby boomers and all. I have a couple of relatives, some of my uncles who like, I want to talk to my doctor and I don't go see him. I have to be speaking with him, via my device and all that. So I know what we all go through. Even I am 50 plus. So getting used to all these digital health thing. I'm sure many people like me too. But yeah, it's massive now. So what are the best practices um, for engaging people like us and others who are coming to terms with digital health solutions? How would you encourage us to actually accept and adapt and adopt to digital health solutions?
I think that there are two parties, as always, in that, and that's the doctors and the patients. So I'll start with the people that I feel we should be influencing, which is the doctors.
Hmm.
Now, if you're a doctor and you're doing things by telehealth, you need to understand what the implications are of that. You're not actually touching the patient. You're not. There are so many other aspects of the interaction that you are missing out on. You can't see what's going on either side of that patient. You're focused on the patient in front of you. Now, that means, as in this interaction, you need to make sure you're looking into the camera. You need to make sure that the patient feels that you are present, even when you are on screen. Because it's very easy to be doing this sort of thing. You'll be looking at notes and glancing up occasionally and showing the top of your head to the patient. I think that's where we lose out. And medical schools will need to teach how to get those interactions better. There's no question those interactions are here to stay, because for many patients, particularly in COVID times, it is not possible to go and see a doctor face to face
Hmm.
because you're on chemotherapy, you've got neutropenia, and you can't go and risk your life in an
Hmm.
environment where potentially you could become infected. And that's
Hmm.
one. For patients, I think it's also important to know when it is entirely inappropriate to be using telemedicine. Now, I occasionally get phone calls from patients who say, I've got this terrible tummy pain. I can't get out of bed. Doctor, what do you advise? And my advice is you must come and see a doctor in person, because I can't make a diagnosis based on you having those problems and not able to actually examine you. And there's always possible, if we're aware a patient is coming in who needs extra help, to gown up, to be ready to receive that patient, whether it's in the emergency or in practice or whatever it happens to be. So we will have to adapt to those things. They're here to stay. They've allowed us to reach places we couldn't reach before. And I think that
Absolutely.
that's the way forward.
Brilliant. That is fantastic. And so, with your students, your medical students, are these all imbibed when you're lecturing them? Digital health and everything.
Yeah, we as like other medical schools, I'm sure we've all been taken by surprise at how quickly and readily this whole business of telemedicine has been adopted. I think it's a matter of time before it becomes part of the curriculum,
Hmm.
where not only are you trained on seeing a patient face to face and making sure your body language, the script that you're using when you're communicating is appropriate, but you're also trained on the online presence and how best to do that.
Hmm. Absolutely. I'm sure very soon. Definitely, we have no choice. The
We
doctors
have
will have no choice, and the students too. It's gonna really be part of a curriculum. Not just medical doctors, I think other, healthcare professionals and even patient advocates like us, we need to start learning, the birds and the bees kind of thing of digital health. Yeah, yeah,
Look, my,
that's
my very dear friend, Dr. BJ Miller, who's a palliative care physician, does all of his consulting online. And I think that he finds that he is able to provide a very good service to his patients based on that. I think people like him will need to be involved much more. And palliative care is an area where you do need to be, you have superb skills. He has superb skills, and he's able to transmit them online. And I think that's the sort of person who will need to lead us through into the next century, as it were.
so.
He's
Like we're talking about brilliant and dedicated physicians like you. I mean, um, who don't have time to keep up with the latest literature. Everything is, peer reviews and stuff like that, or even doing a lot of stuff that doctors are supposed to do write papers and everything. So all these can lead to a lot of burnout, physician burnout. So, and then you now have, what is it, best practices. And so before best practices become actual practices, common practice, of course, there's a time lag. So, Dr. Jiwa, do you get physician burnouts? And if you do, how do you, overcome it? What do you do?
I think the first thing to recognize is that to do the job well of doctoring, you have to be present, you have to be mindful, you have to give an awful lot of yourself. And my advice to any budding doctor is don't even pretend you can do this for your whole life.
Mm.
It is not possible to be full-time clinician, in my view, and provide that ongoing aspect that is required for the best interactions. And so my advice would be that you have another part of your life, whether it's reflective writing, whether it is doing research, whether it is teaching. And I think teaching is a fantastic way to keep yourself current, but at the same time, keep yourself passionate about what you do. And I'm very, very lucky in my career to have spent so much time teaching and doing research and thinking and talking to people like yourself. That's what keeps
Oh,
that's what keeps me interested. It's what keeps me fresh. So that when I go into practice, I am there fully present and engaged with my patients.
yes, sir. And so, as regards that time lag between best practices and the common practice, how can you shorten the gap? What do you think should be done to shorten the gap? Because sometimes it takes a long period.
I think that the one teacher that we often miss, that we often fail to include in our classrooms are patients. Because there's nothing like, Grace, there's nothing about breast cancer, I bet, that you don't know, right? And
Absolutely.
or nothing about any other cancer that your listeners will know about that is even vaguely in the textbooks yet.
Hmm.
I think if we can bring the patient voice increasingly into continuing medical education for doctors, and particularly if we include it in our conversations with our students. So you're teaching about lung cancer, you don't proceed with finishing that bit of the teaching without a patient being present and saying, this is what's going on currently in that field. I think that would make a huge difference to making doctors and patients, bring them on the same page and making sure that we very quickly get the science into practice.
Absolutely. I'm very happy about that. And I do know that, you are huge on the patient voice. The patients have to be involved because, like someone had mentioned that, doctors are the ones that practice medicine, and we, the patients, we practice living. Why? Because we are the ones feeling everything. We have to now tell the doctor, this is what's happening to me. Because if I don't tell you, you wouldn't know exactly I'm feeling pain in my abdomen or something like that. So yeah, the patient voice is necessary in all facets of medicine, really, right now. And thank God that, you know, everybody finds that very, very important and useful in, having better outcomes, as you say. Yeah. Oh, Dr. Jiwa, this is so wonderful and everything. So, another thing that I'm also huge on is mental health. I've done a lot of work, with the United Nations to deal with mental health. My team and I, before I had cancer, actually worked to see that 195 missions actually agreed to include mental health in the SDG 3s. So this is something that I'm very particular about. One of my guests happened to be a frontline worker that I interviewed during the peak of the pandemic. And this was a lovely girl and everything. When I interviewed her, she looked strained and sad and all that, because she had lost patience, and she was going through so much, um, mentally and physically and everything. Dr. Jiwa, how have you been able to contain yourself during these times, and also that of your medical students, who I'm sure a lot of them have probably doing residency somewhere, and were also on the front lines? How were you able to, should I say, support yourself to support them, because they look up to you as a mentor? How were
Yeah.
you able to keep everybody in check, so to speak?
That's a very good question. And I reflected on this even as I was preparing to speak with you. And it
Mhm.
occurred to me that the one thing that challenges often do is tell us where our weak spots are. Right? So when somebody comes in and they're very distressed about what's going on in the wards, or what's happened with that last patient, or how they're coping with the pressure, you've got to ask yourself, what is the challenge here? What is the real challenge here for you? And often what we find is that this is life's way of saying there's something not quite right, whether it is how they're managing their time, how they're dealing with the stress, how they're feeling about breaking bad news, how they're feeling about managing uncertainty, how they're feeling about passing their exams. There's something that's bothering them. And that sometimes is the silver lining. It's the gift that's been sent to them to say, you need to think about this. Are you on the right road? Are you doing what you need to do? Should you be caring more about yourself? Should you be focusing more on that skill deficit? Should you be
Mhm.
thinking about how you're interacting with people that is not giving you the reward that you're asking for? So in many ways, without, first of all, it's acknowledging that we all feel that way. That's very important. It's not just saying, go away and think about it. It's to
Yeah.
say, I hear you. I can see the pain written on your face. And then beyond that, how can we explore this, and what's the challenge in it for you? And then wait for them to identify what the challenge is, not what you think it is.
Absolutely. And then aside you, because when I was discussing with her, she was like, "Oh, okay. Sometimes you don't want to bother, people like you, the actual doctors. So they have a peer-to-peer um, hub where they all feel free to speak about their, fears, and they cry and everything. And that actually also helped them, because now it was amongst equals, you know. They didn't have to look too good in front of, you know, the big guy, you understand. They could actually talk about, hey, I'm having issues at home, or like you said, my exams or whatever. So they also look out for themselves to see how they can, support each other during these times.
Yes,
Absolutely.
it is. I
Yeah.
agree. And we encourage students and even our staff to make sure that they check in on each other.
Hmm.
Are you okay? Is a question we often ask people to ask. And then there's a wonderful book by Michael Bungay Stanier. I'm not sure that you have
Haven't
heard it,
heard it. No.
called The Coaching Habit. And he offers you 7 questions that you should ask somebody who comes in and says they have a problem or they're distressed about something. And one of the questions is, what's the challenge in this for you? Because often you think, oh, it's because they're not managing their time properly or whatever it happens to be. Rather than jumping in with advice, it's often better for them to identify what the challenge is. And it might be as simple as, maybe I need to take an earlier bus because that means I'll be in a little bit earlier, and then I can actually center myself
Hmm.
before I do what I have to do. And they've solved their problem.
Hmm. True. True. So that is another way of talking about reflective practice, right? Thinking back to move forward, so to speak. What could I have done right, and all that. Yeah.
All roads lead back to ourselves. We often have within us the answer to our question if only we would take the time to ask deep within ourselves what it is that, and the guidance comes from somewhere, somehow.
Yes, I do agree. Thank you so much for that. That one resonates with me. So, Dr. Jiwa, you're an exceptionally busy man, multitasker par excellence, all that, doing so many things. But how you looking at you, you look so relaxed. I'm sure you've had a busy day, but you look as if you just, you're just coming out of yoga class, very relaxed and everything. How do you keep yourself so grounded and so focused? What tricks can you
I'm not sure that I have any tricks. I mean,
impart?
I do.
Tricks in inverted commas.
I certainly do yoga. I do a lot of swimming, and
Okay.
I eat a healthy diet, which all of which helps. And I think that's sometimes people assume that that's something you can just, it's a granted, but we don't always do that right. But I think the thing that probably has helped me the most has been my age and my experience. In that, I'm also in my 50s, and I'm not sure that I would have answered you with the question in the way that I answered them in my 20s, 30s, or 40s. I think I've been very blessed in that I haven't come out of my life too scarred, and that I was able
Bless God.
to, bless God, I was able to reflect on those experiences. And I always realize, and when I look back, I realize that the things that really got me worried in my 20s and 30s and even in my 40s, I don't even think about them now. They don't matter at all. And the battles that I may have got engaged in were entirely unnecessary.
Mm,
And that the to have the faith that a lot of the time people come with things that really all they're wanting you to do is to listen and reflect, and the solution is there for you. And also to realize that I get a lot out of those interactions, and that it's not a challenge when somebody comes in with a problem. It's an opportunity for us to have a meaningful interaction which leads to better outcomes for everybody, and I am the wiser for it. So I don't know whether that answers your question,
it
but
does. It's loaded. It
get
is
hold of
loaded.
me.
Yes, it is. It is. We have all been through so much, and like you rightly said, when you look back, you're like, oh my God, did that happen? How did I even go through that? And then it mattered a lot, but now it's like, you know, not that you would say it's like a walk in the park now, but definitely it's not as if it was deleted from memory. We all went through some kind of experience to learn from it, and impart,
The thing to
so.
remember is that there will come a day, sooner or later, there will come a day when none of this will matter at all, because
Hmm.
you will take your last breath on this earth. And why will any of this matter?
Hmm.
The things that you think are so important, the bills that you have to pay, and the whatever other things that are on your mind will not matter at all. And you will look back, and the answer you will never come out with was, I should have spent more time at the office.
Hmm. Very true. Very true. Yeah. Well, God gives us life, to be able to do more and to be able to learn more from my experiences and all that. And yeah, especially for many of us who have been through crazy health issues, we're like, what? Then it was like, oh, okay, I'm going to die. Am I going to die? Whatever. Now, like you rightly said, those things don't mean much anymore because so many beautiful things have come out of even the most traumatizing of experiences that we have been through. So, like you rightly said, everything worketh for good. There's a reason for everything happening, right? So, we thank God. So,
I
Dr.
agree.
Jiwa, before we round up, is there any word of advice you'd love to give to that? person watching that is actually going through something overwhelming right now?
Yeah. I think probably the shortest advice would be that this too shall pass.
Mm,
There's one thing we can be guaranteed of in life, and that change will happen, change will go. And no matter how painful an experience is at the time, this too shall pass. And that we need not to be attached to the outcome in the end. And in the end, the outcome is always, it always serves us well. And if you look back on your life, you will see this so many times if you take the time just to reflect.
So, yeah. Um, so, Dr. Jiwa, you have been such a fantastic guest. I don't even know what to say again. Thank you so much for coming on. Like you rightly said, uh, this too shall pass, and it shall indeed for that person that is watching us right now. I'm so happy that you were able to come, to the show and give your very, very valuable insights. And I'm sure the audience and the viewers will be all the better for it. Thank you so much, Dr. Jiwa. I'm so honored for your presence.
Grace, you're very kind. Thank you so much for indulging. And again, a man who's getting older and older and able to share something of what I've learned in the last few years.
Thank you so much. So before I sign you out, let me sign out and speak to my guests, okay? So, my dear audience and friends, there you have it. You have been listening to the amazing Dr. Moyez Jiwa, and I hope you've been able to take away key pointers from this conversation regarding the patient voice, health design, health delivery, and digital health. Key takeaway point is whatever you are going through, this too shall pass. And also, if you're a patient, don't forget, have no fear, voice your opinions, let your voice be heard. All right. So, this is coming to the end of the show now. If you have not yet joined our community, please do so by subscribing and sharing our YouTube episodes and channels. Don't forget, knowledge is power. So until the next episode, this is Grace B signing out. Ciao, ciao. Thank you so much, Dr. Moyez. Thank
You're
you.
very welcome. You're very
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
be well.